All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday evening. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today titled Sourcing from Startups and Scale-Ups. We will have an amazing discussion for about 30 minutes, and then we will have time in the end. Use the chat function to send any questions. We will likely go through them in the end, and we have enough time planned for an initial discussion based on your questions as well. So as the title already indicates, today we are going to talk about collaborations between corporates and startups and scale-ups. Because as we are all aware of, over the last 5 years, we've seen hundreds of procurement technology startups and scale-ups emerge, leading to very cluttered provider landscape. And it's not uncommon that a CPO comes to me and says, well, Lucas, there are so many, where should I start now? And as there is no proven playbook of where to start, it can be very challenging for corporations to know how to adopt these new technologies in the best possible way and how to get the most value out of those partnerships. So that's why together we will really dig into these topics, where we spend a very short amount of time to quickly understand how a startup or scale-up actually works, and then mainly focus on the topics, which is what modern procurement teams need to do to actually work effectively with startups and scale-ups, and of course, vice versa, and how procurement teams can leverage startups and scale-ups for the greatest impact. And of course, it's a two-way conversation. So it's not only corporates who need to do something, it's also on us to provide enough value to do something. In the end, we will wrap it up with a short summary of what it actually takes to make these collaborations a success. So again, as a reminder, please add your questions. We will go through them in the end. And I'm not alone here today. We actually have a super amazing and interesting panel, which will help us to shed some light from different angles on different topics. And I would love to start with a quick intro round. And I would love to hand it over to you, Marielle, for the start.
Thank you, Lucas, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Marielle Beyer. I'm the CPO at Roche. I've been with Roche for 10 years now, but more importantly, I've been in the procurement profession for over 22 years now, and I've seen quite a bit in the sense of technologies and emerging technologies. And I've been, very excited about the recent developments with some intriguing ideas and startups really entering the scene. So really looking forward to the conversation today. And maybe over to you now, Sebastian.
Thank you, Marielle. And also thanks, Lucas, for the invite to this interesting panel discussion. So my name is Sebastian. I'm working actually within E.ON and responsible there for supply chain innovation and digitalization in the utility sector since more than a decade. And since the early beginning and passion and love with procurement supply chains. So follow this development. And I think especially nowadays, we have a special key role in the organization. And how supply chain startups and procurement startups can help us in this situation is a very interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to a very brilliant discussion today.
Welcome on board, Sebastian and Marielle. Henning, would you round it up?
And I guess, yes, I'm next. My name is Henning Hatje. I'm one of the co-founders of a procure tech company, Lotse, based in Berlin. I've been in the procurement technology space for a good 3 years now. And yeah, very excited to join this discussion with you today.
Thank you. And I didn't introduce myself, but probably people know I'm Lucas, co-founder of Archlet, currently located in Zurich. And as promised, we will start the discussion to add some background on how to actually start a startup and what's the motivation behind it. And I would love to hear your story, Henning. Like, why did you start Lotse? How did it come?
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. It was actually very unexpectedly, to be honest. I wasn't looking for an idea to start a startup. I wasn't looking for that in particular, but I was working on a consulting project back at my time at Boston Consulting, and we were restructuring an airline. So most of it was also related to procurement. And we saw these problems, that there was so much still like manual labor, manual analyses happening within that project that kind of struck me, and which kind of planted a seed in my head that this is a problem that probably needs a solution at some point. And then one thing came to the other. One of my best friends, actually my best friend, approached me to quit, and that we started a startup and do something about it. So it kind of happened consequentially based on figuring out this problem that companies face.
And that's what I can only relate to, because very commonly people think like startups are founded based on an idea. You wake up in the morning and you have the great idea and then you start building it. It happens, but especially in the business to business sector where we play, so providing software for other companies or providing a service for other companies, it's actually very, very common that you start with a problem, right? And the problem is either found by yourself or brought to you through a partner or through a corporate who actually lets you in and see the problem. And you start the company with the goal to solve that problem, to relieve the pain and add value for that specific issue. And very similar story is the one from Archlet. When Tim Jacob and I were studying at ETH Zurich, we had actually, our focus was on data science, and we kind of got into a procurement related topic by coincidence and realized that they have a lot of pain analyzing offers during tenders. So we really started with that problem statement. How can we make better decisions faster? And what does it need to actually further automate and guide that process? So again, also here, kind of a proof point that problems are the best way to start a company. And now handing over to you, Marielle and Sebastian, kind of representing today the corporate world, which should not be a two-fronted discussion here. I would be really curious what you believe are the main motivations for corporations and startups to collaborate, and why should corporate procurement teams actually work with startups or scale-ups? From your perspective, maybe, Marielle.
Yeah, Lucas, first of all, let me commend both you, Lucas, Henning, and your partners for, it takes also a little bit of courage kind of to step out of, the known, right? And take a business challenge, right? And turn it into an opportunity. But that's actually the same kind of thinking. I'm sure, Sebastian, you will agree that within procurement, we want to evolve to. It's not to reacting to a certain need, but really understanding the true need or opportunity and approaching it from that perspective. And I think that is, at the end of the day, your absolute differentiator, right? Legacy partners, right, who've been in the field of, let's say, source to pay, contract to pay solutions, in that remit, right? This is about incrementally improving based on a user experience, right? And every now and then there's an add-on innovation or so, but you really approach it from a very different angle. There's an opportunity statement, right? Or there's a problem statement. Let us find a solution. And that makes it very compelling for us and very intriguing to assess, okay, how have these guys approached it, right? Because we know what we have and we know it's not always working so great. I am someone who's been, for many years been dealing with the same issues, and I wonder why, right? Why do I still have to think about vendor master issues and supplier onboarding that's taking forever? And why is all of that not leading to actual outcomes like operational efficiencies or greater automation or more low touch, right? And so, I mean, for me, it just simply makes it very intriguing because you approach it from a very different angle. There's no baggage. There's no, oh, we need to improve and we got feedback from a set of customers and we now need to introduce a new requirement where you almost lose sight of the outcome you're trying to accomplish. But you're saying, no, we're actually designing something that's exactly supposed to address that need or that opportunity statement. So, I mean, compliments to you. I'm grateful that this is a new development and that makes it very compelling for us to evaluate these kind of solutions. Sebastian, I don't know what you think.
listening to what you actually say, more or less, I can identify with a lot of that points, even if we are in different industries. So that means that we all in common have the same problems or also the same history speaking about those topics. And what is quite nice for me to observe also as response to your point, Lukas, is thinking 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, there were maybe a handful of solutions for the area of procurement available in the market, large-scale solutions, which a lot of you know. And it's quite interesting with the story of the development of procurement to see how the market also with solutions developed. So we can be proud now to see that there are hundreds of solutions available, not only large-scale solutions, big platforms, but also niche solutions covering problems that we need to solve. And that is quite interesting with the whole storyline of procurement and supply chain to observe in a time where more or less our function is really needed in this market situation. And that is quite interesting. And now we need to find out how we can apply those instruments and tools that we have and can be proud of.
And I think the time perspective is a super interesting topic. And I would really love to deep dive on that quickly, because what I've asked myself is it more important to collaborate with startups and scale-ups now than it was a few years ago? Or was it always similar important, but there was just less demand in the market, so it was harder for corporates to actually find niche players who solve a specific point solution problem?
I have a perspective, Lukas. Quite frankly, there probably would have been a great opportunity years ago also to work with emerging technologies and startups. But now we have, we're facing kind of an unprecedented level of volatility. I mean, things are happening so quickly, right? And so fast. And I mean, shoot me if I have to, implement a technology backbone for another 8 years. By the time it's implemented across 160 markets, it doesn't serve me any good, right? So I think given the high degree of volatility and complexity, right? The ability to respond fast is absolutely essential, and we need to upskill. And upskill means you upskill with a certain set of capabilities, right? But at the same time, that needs to be enabled through technology. So I would say now more than ever needed, but it would have been exciting a few years ago too.
Sebastian, what is your opinion about that?
Maybe also going a bit back where we are coming from, to not forget that we are not speaking about 30 years development here. And so this means quite a lot of speed in the market and the development. Rethinking again, 5 up to 10 years ago, you spoke with one or other key account of these large scale solutions, and they even jumped from one to the other provider. And you know what was going on more or less in the market. This changed, and now you need to also observe a larger perspective, also startups, and also therefore new more or less opportunities arise. Take for instance, I just recently saw on LinkedIn the newest map of Louis Epstein, where also we can see solutions. This was not there from the early beginning on LinkedIn, even as more or less a finder. There are also providers now offering the opportunity to see what kind of startups are available in market. 10 years ago, I never found something similar. There was just a talk with the key account of the one or other provider and personal conversation. This developed, but also honestly, and maybe this is also something we can elaborate on, during that time, procurement organizations and also responsible colleagues for systems and processes had to learn to work with startups. Due to the fact that beforehand, they only or mainly work with large-scale solutions, these big providers, and they work different than to you.
And Sebastian, and also our operating models have changed. I mean, quite frankly, when you evolve your operating model and you kind of carve out, it's not anymore this hierarchical traditional organization. Here you have your sourcing or value delivery engine. You start to, develop a much more flexible organization with, targeted investment into capabilities, right? If you can then enhance that, right, with technology, with some sort of solution, that's the way to go. But you know, these two things have to align, right? The idea and technology alone will not do it, right? So I think the stars align here, right? In now being a really good time to engage startups. Yeah.
And that's a super interesting direction we're heading. And Henning, I know you've won recently large corporations as clients, and as we've heard, it's always a two-sided conversation, right? If there's a win-win, both parties have to bring something to the table to make that relationship successful. So I'm wondering if you could share a few best practices you've seen, what startups need to bring to make a successful collaboration, but also if you have a strong opinion about what corporates need to bring, obviously share that as well. And then we can go a bit in that direction too.
Yes, sure. I mean, one thing I think is quite clear, you need to be able to demonstrate some form of ROI. I think that's for certain. Otherwise, there's just so much going on, as Marielle and Sebastian just mentioned. The landscape has exploded, and I mean the market map of the procure tech companies looks like an explosion as well. The one from Louise. So you need to be clear in the ROI that you deliver as a startup, even though that's not always very clear in the beginning, because part of this discovery process in our experience is also to figuring that out together sometimes, because this might differ in different contexts of different organizations. And then, of course, you need to somehow be able to demonstrate an urgency as well to do something about it now, because there's always, many solutions have a benefit, but you never know if this net benefit, considering also all the kind of external costs or costs that come with it, not just financially, but time investments, opportunity costs that you would avoid at this, or things that you would not do in the same time, if the benefits still outweigh the costs. So that's kind of the hard facts, I would say. And the other thing is to bring some kind of honesty also into the process. And this way, I think it's really good, like how, let's just put it a bit more the European, or maybe even to some sense the German way of doing this, of things that will go well, but also the risks that come with it, and to be very transparent about it, because what we see and what we understand, of course, companies are risk averse in the end to change existing processes, and with good reason in many cases. And you need to talk about those risks and try to mitigate them in a good way. There's no point in either saying they're not there, because that's not true, they are there, but then to talk about them, to mitigate them. And then that brings me to the other side. What can corporates bring? Very briefly, that kind of willingness to sometimes overcome a few risks that might be there, and really assess if these are really, if these risks are substantial, or if they're, again, net negative or net positive, maybe in a sense that still doing it, or like going with a solution provider might bring you some learnings that also have a positive effect beyond the risks you might be facing. Because it's, as we see it, it's usually not about like financial risk or the cost of a solution, but more about externalities that might come with it.
And I believe, like, these points you mentioned, I can only relate to. One thing I've learned is that as a startup, you can actually also help to create this honesty and transparency. And you can also help to better understand your value, because there's this common misunderstanding in the market that every time I talk to people, to other founders, people might say, well, corporates are super slow. They don't actually know what they want, right? But you can also turn it around and say, well, if you as a startup are not able to articulate the value in a way that you create urgency and that pain is prioritized, you maybe don't do a good job in actually selling what you actually try to solve, right? So adding value is key. Being honest in the process is key as well, because in the end, it's also a time waste for both parties, right? If you talk to a company who is looking for a risk solution, but you do all the steps with them, and in the end, they tell you, well, sourcing is not priority. It's either you say, well, then sort your priorities right, or just ask in the beginning, what are your priorities, to avoid a common kind of time waste.
That kind of brings us back to your initial point, or how actually we started Lotse and how you started Archlet. by looking at a problem and not by looking at a solution to a maybe not existent or not prioritized problem, and to really think about that also in like in the initial process when coming together with a company, and when discussing business case and solutions, that you're thinking about, okay, what's the problem of that organization in that specific field? Is it relevant? And maybe also not only about the company, but also about the person you're dealing with, the decision maker or the sponsor or the person that is kind of supporting you internally. What are what challenges are they facing, maybe to push implementing you as a solution, and not just your perspective?
Challenges is a great keyword, and maybe we can hand it over to Marielle and Sebastian to shed some light on what hurdles or challenges you have to overcome to work with startups, or also if you have some best practices to add from the question before, please also feel free to share your thoughts on that.
No, I think you summarized it adequately, but there also has to be some acknowledgement of that it's not going to be easy, right? Because, from a corporate standpoint, there's a long history of growth, of complexity, of behaviors, of a certain culture. And as much as, we are looking for that fix, that, solution, that door, right, that will solve these very, very compelling issues, we do have a set of requirements, right? There's always that, how do you connect to the backbone, right? How do we integrate? And, so acknowledging that and coming together as partners, right? And really working through that, those hurdles, I think, is super important. And then, but still not losing sight of the issue you want to, the issue you want to solve, and not losing sight of that light approach that you have, and the innovation and the usability, because we easily fall into those old behaviors and patterns where we load requirements and more and more and more and more, and then we have something completely customized, again, great for Roche, but we completely lost track of the initial idea here. So it's also keeping each other honest and somewhere finding the middle ground. And yes, I agree, it requires certain risk appetite. So for example, at Roche, and this is true for the startups we engage with from a procurement function, but we also help other startups that have innovative solutions, right, for our business, to get their foot in, right? And so, we've put a lot of thought into what can that engagement process look like for a startup, so we don't kill you with a 60-page MSA and IT security survey that is, that takes you 3 hours to complete, and I don't know, an insurance or liability insurance that's out of this world, but rather say your experience to the conclusion of a POC should be very, very light. And once we feel in that POC, we have something that's working for us, it fits into our landscape, right? The integration topics and God knows what, right? That's when we really come together and say, well, maybe we need to go a little bit deeper now in with our requirements in the sense of this partnership. But so, those are hurdles, right? And there's another hurdle that is, it will be very hard for a startup to navigate a complex corporate. I mean, I can't even navigate this organization. So how would I expect that you do that, right? And so it's also there, coming together and supporting each other, providing mentors, coaches who can help you as a startup be successful in such an organization, or create the right connections in whatever the ecosystem is. But Sebastian, I'm sure you have your thoughts.
Many points that I can also reflect on. But I would say there are also some preconditions that need to be fulfilled. And you mentioned one point in the prior question and response. That is bottom up. You need the culture also to support this. So bottom up from the teams, from the digital team that is supporting also and enabling the project implementation together with you as startups, so that you have the openness. And that is not only in the supply chain or procurement function. You also need to convince our IT colleagues or the dots. You need to work with those guys who normally deal with only these SAP or other large-scale solutions. Yeah, the back end, which you mentioned, yeah, where we think about integration and complexity always when we deal with these things. Yeah, and we already have this in mind, and this is maybe also hindering us. So we need this bottom-up willingness also to support this. Why? We have a great story to tell. We are in the situation, like you mentioned, that we deal with this complexity and we need to find solutions in various directions as procurement supply chain functions. We have thousands of users in our systems in a daily process from an end-to-end perspective, starting with requisitioners, catalog users, etc. So we have a great story also in order to say digitalization is an enabler, because we are in the middle in this spider web. And we need to route our end-to-end processes through this, and we give the guidance. So like the value chain manager, we also give the process guidance in these various aspects in our organization. And we have a lot of suppliers and potential in the market. So we are more or less connecting these dots, and we need to enable also, therefore, and a bit more or less willingness to invest. Because also procurement was not since the beginning the investor of or the function with the most budget when it comes to IT solutions. We also need to rethink about that. So the potential and the stories that we can tell in order to get this done and more or less fulfill these preconditions. And then we can more or less start, and I think this is important, Henning, which you mentioned, to speak on eye level. And there I really appreciate an openness. So not saying at the beginning, we promise you this and that. No, you're a niche player, and we need to know from the beginning where we can more or less start with and what we can expect at the end of this journey, and not to mix it up with this backbone implementation and big, large scale project where we are anyhow dealing with. I give you one concrete example in utility, especially in German market. In the last years, we had to deal a lot with legacy system changes due to rechanges, and yeah, for sure, you need to find a fit where also a startup can find a home in this phase. Yeah.
And the cultural point you're referring to, Sebastian, I remember you once told me that you see a startup collaboration sometimes also like a learning journey, where you invest a certain amount of money in a POC or in a kind of a shorter term relationship, and also say, hey, look at it as a learning journey, learn from them. Learn how they articulate problems, etc. Is that something you still do, or?
Yeah, I want to even more or less bring it to also another point. You need maybe also a failure culture, because going into that journey maybe ends also with a learning, with failure. Yeah, we don't like to speak about that maybe in a certain aspect, but also this must be allowed. It's a proof of concept. It's maybe a try. But we need to find a solution to fit into a problem, which is not this 3-year project or 4-year project approach. And therefore, maybe we also need to think about this.
Super, super interesting. Now, we are running already out of time. It's 30 minutes in. So I would say I would like to end up our dialogue and then move into Q&A. We have already 17 questions coming in, just another one right now. So what would you recommend to others who are interested in engaging with ProcureTech software startups? If you share one best practice or one key learning you had in the past, what would you give our listeners with on their way to kind of foster that culture of innovation? And maybe Henning, if you might want to start. If you're not ready, just pass it over to Marielle or Sebastian.
There's so much, but I would say it's really about one thing. It's really about mindset, because that's the only thing I would say the individual can work on individually without trying to change the whole organization. and to kind of try to come into like a mindset of discovery, that you're trying to discover and embrace new technologies or new paths, even though they might not be established in a given organization yet. But what we experience is that in many cases, especially also when it's not just the procurement people in the room, but also some maybe corporate development, digitalization teams, that you actually find more common ground than you would expect initially. And even though a lot of things are already as they are, and they've been like this for a long time in many companies, there's in the end, internally, individually in the people, there's a lot more kind of want for discovery and for trying stuff out than you would think. So I think it's a mindset thing to work on that.
Sorry, no, mindset and willingness to fail and discover, right?
Yes.
Nice. What about you, Marielle?
Yeah, no, very well said, Henning. You know, for me, it comes down to what Sebastian also just said. It's, you know, experimentation that comes with wins and it comes with failures, right? And, you know, the important thing is, you know, that we keep a good dialogue and understand why have we failed and is it still a valid solution, right? And under which circumstances could it be a benefit, right? Because we're all interested in one thing, and that is solving a problem, right? Yeah, and you know, having you know a solution to that, and so, you know, I think just going at it and then ideally failing quickly, because, you know, I do know, and I'm partially I feel partially a culprit in this. You know, we can drag things out for a long time, right? And that's also not fair, right, in this experimentation. So but I would say that's a good starting point. Yeah.
So be experimental and try it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
What about you, Sebastian?
Key learnings, also to summarize that, try to really bottom up prepare also the preconditions so that we can work with startups with smaller solutions together. So try really to map them out, what is currently hindering you, make it concrete, whether these are stakeholders you need to collaborate with, whether these are budget preconditions, etc. Also really point that out. And then if you maybe also have a concrete problem, rethink this, maybe make or buy. So I mean, we are speaking about procurement. Don't always think that you need to develop that on your own by customizing there and there. Yeah, so maybe also classical make or buy decision, and speak with those guys out there. There are many. Learn from each other. And as said, be open to try that. So you stated that already. You don't need to reinvent always the Lego platform, but more or less building blocks on that can be easy done also with niche players and solutions, and try that.
Great summary. Thank you, Sebastian. I would add one quick anecdote here. For me, it's also priorities and focus. And when our most successful relationships with large corporates, they actually did a workshop internally and asked people about their pain points. They summarized the pain points, and then they prioritized what has highest priority for us now, what has highest priority for us later, and what is actually not on our priority list. And with that, it was super clear and straightforward from the beginning what they're looking for, what pain they want to solve, what pain they have, but not yet, and what things they might have found, but they don't prioritize it. So prioritization and focus, I can only recommend. I know it's probably a lot of work because, as you said, Marielle, it's a complex organization, so you need to manage through. But that's something I've seen and witnessed as a very large success driver. So we had a lot about changing mindset, explore and do it. And then Sebastian, be open and also make the make or buy decision. As procurement, you don't need to think, you always need to build it by yourself. Cool. So I will hand over now to the Q&A session, or we will pass over to the Q&A session. And there is one question coming in from an anonymous attendee, but I really like to kick it off. And the question is actually, how do you actually discover the right partners? And it's directed to you, Marielle and Sebastian. Like, where do you go? How do you find it? As we've heard, it's so cluttered, but how did you find it? How do you find them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a push and pull. I mean, I will start, right? If you look at, you know, that digital tech landscape that Sebastian referred to earlier, my God, that can be easily overwhelming, right? So, and have I talked to each one of those? Have I spoken and engaged with each one of those startups? No, yeah. But so within my procurement function, we have a digital roadmap, we have a strategy and an understanding where we have gaps, right? So if you think, you know, we have a backbone that is kind of covering mostly the downstream, and then we have these bolt-on solutions where we have an urgent need, but also where we have the biggest impact for the organization, right? You name it, supplier relationship management or performance management or customer relationship management. And so, I mean, we start there. And that's sometimes frustrating because, so today I have a sourcing solution. Can I say that it's fantastic? No. Do I believe that there's probably, you know, greater, more advanced, really cool sourcing startups out there? Absolutely. But the reality is I've trained 1,000 people on it. I've committed to something with a major investment, right? And I'm, you know, seeing the trajectory of, in the meantime, 4 times more sourcing events, right, on the platform. I have the data, etc. So now is not the timing for me to distract my organization with something that's okay. It's working, right? You know, can I do scenarios, Lucas? No, I can't. Yeah, is that interesting? Probably yes, right? But so I park that idea and I start from a need basis, right? And so you narrow down your use cases where you say, we really have a problem there. And so what we've done is either engage directly. I've met some of you right in conferences, or some of my team have met you. That's great. But another thing that has been very successful for us is do some scouting. So we've given some of those scouts out there the business problem, right? And said, can you find some innovative solutions for us? And I tell you what, through that, we've actually successfully onboarded 2 startups that are addressing this business need. Yeah. So for example, Tailspend, yeah, that was disastrous. You know, we found a compelling value proposition through such a scout, right? We went to POC quickly. We recognized, hey, that works. We went through all the, you know, rest together then with a kind of firm commitment for partnership, and they're, you know, well integrated in our kind of digital ecosystem or whatever you'd like to call it. So, and so I have to sometimes hold back when, you know, I get some exciting or inspiring value propositions because I just can't overwhelm my organization. Yeah. And so I kind of place that on the roadmap for sometime in the future and really approach it from a need basis, which narrows down the choices. I don't know, Sebastian, how are you approaching this?
Yeah, maybe 3 concrete points. As said, there are networks out there like LinkedIn, etc., and there are a lot of promoters of startups where you can find also already mapped overviews which this solution is fitting with to which problem or which market, more or less niche. So make use of this. This is available. This is free. Yeah. Connect there with those guys, maybe add them. That doesn't cost money, is to just more or less connect in those networks, and maybe then you are also responding. That's the first conversation, means maybe a coffee chat. Second, we can all learn from each other. This is an open ecosystem. Yeah. So if you see that there is maybe the one or other to the left or to the right, we can connect and we can do that. And that means maybe also sometimes just a 15-minute coffee chat, yeah, with our network. And the third one, which is I think also important for you guys, Lukas and Henning, are also the promoters. So more or less the angels supporting you, bringing you into that network. And these are concrete 3 points where you can get in contact. One point I would like to add, maybe not always mix it up with these big solutions which we mentioned, and I already saw some questions. So remember maybe also the chessboard, the famous one, and you speak about sourcing. Maybe your existing solution covers 70% of all sourcing tenders that you need to cover. But maybe you need for a big spend group, so material group, to cover 20% more. And this is complex tendering, which is not covered by this big large scale solution. Make use of a startup. Simple example.
Super insightful. Thank you so much. I would go ahead and ask a question from Jean-Marc in the direction of, are there specific metrics that you would recommend to actually measure success of working with a startup? And maybe Henning, do you have, or anyone else in the group, like how do you measure success by working with startups? We heard it a bit from your side, Marielle. Speed is king, so quick POC, quick deployment, quick value proof. Is there something else you could share with the audience, how success could be managed or measured with such an collaboration?
Yeah, I think there's no kind of silver bullet for this. Of course, it always depends on what are you trying to achieve. So to measure something, you need to kind of know what you actually want to measure and what you want to achieve. And I think in many cases, neither the solution providers like us nor the corporates exactly know in the beginning what the ideal outcome would be. Of course, you want to have some savings or you want to be more efficient in the organization. But I really like what Sebastian, what you said in the beginning as well. And you mentioned it several times that it's kind of also about the soft factor of upskilling maybe the team, or maybe not even upskilling, but educating the team about opportunities, taking it as a learning experience, which is a very soft factor kind of in measuring success or what success could also look like. But I think it should be taken into account as well. So my answer is really, for me, there are no specific metrics. You really have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But I think as a corporate, you can have some kind of framework in which you maybe place a solution once you start talking with them, saying like, okay, is this a solution that will play into more like a financial benefits, or is this one that plays more into operational efficiency or maybe in transparency? And if you have your priorities right, maybe on your digital roadmap, for example, Maria, as you mentioned, you say, okay, in the next 2 years, we have a focus on transparency, then you can at least put it in a cluster and then see in this specific cluster, what do we want to achieve?
Totally agree, right? So it's basically, I mean, the success or the KPI should be the outcome you're trying to address, right? That if you successfully address it and you see the results, then that should be, testament that this has worked. Yeah. So.
All right. So we have one last question, and I think that's kind of an easy one. It's a question in the area of, is it ever too early to work with a startup? Can a startup be too early and too immature to work? Or can it also be too late when a startup is already a grown-up, has raised several millions of dollars and actually loses maybe a bit of the speed in navigation? Do you have a kind of a thought on that? It's actually coming also from an anonymous participant, but
yeah, happy to pick that up, and hopefully this is not the hacker organization, so I don't know. Yeah, maybe also concrete points to that. Is it too early? Then I would say, again, back to the point of openness, talk about this. Do you want to commit to this journey, be fair to each other, and really stay where your maturity is? And question is also where the product owner of the startup or the solution is more or less aiming to. And is it then fair enough to say this is the same direction, or are we thinking in different directions? So this needs to be clear, even if it's an early starting point, but that you are open and fair to that point, yeah, and do not influence if you are aiming to a different direction. That must be clear in the beginning. Is it too late? Question mark. From a speed perspective, how more or less do you develop your product? Yeah, in which speed? From a different perspective, if you want to buy the startup, yeah, maybe. From an investment perspective, what I see is we also need to learn that startups have a different investment model than maybe companies 15 years ago who provided software tools. So this also needs to be considered from a maybe also procurement or financial perspective. The second one, the third one, I really would say, again, this is also an investment to fit to the problem, but also different factors, like Henning said, also learning for our people, digital development, digital upskilling, which you need to consider in this business case. Yeah.
Got it. Marielle?
I mean, yeah, so I think all is possible. So all the cases have also happened, right? So, you know, also an anecdote, I mean, we've had startups approach us with, from the business side, granted, right, asking us, you know, you are a kind of cosmetic company, aren't you? And I mean, you know, that's where you say, guys, you have to do your homework, right? Very early on, right? About no, we're a life science company, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes it is really immature and it is very early. But on the other hand, right, we have, for example, embarked on a co-development journey with a startup company because we believe in the solution and the potential. And it is early, right? But we say, okay, you know, let's work with you together. And you know, of course, there's, you know, an ambition to, you know, be kind of benefiting first from the value proposition, right? But there's that too, yeah. So yes, it can be too soon, and sometimes that can be exciting. And on the spectrum of, you know, growth, you know, you do sometimes see that growth can get in the way, right, of a good relationship, or, you know, then, you know, how do you operationalize that aggressive growth? And the startups, you know, often when there's, you know, funding behind that, there's an expectation to grow, right? And that expectation to grow is exciting, right? And you know, you sell your solution because you believe in it and because it has a great value proposition. But then you need to deliver on the back end, and of course it can get frustrating, you know, on the receiving end if that delivery is not growing in the same way, right? And so we've seen that too. So I think on that spectrum it can be anything, and so. You know, it's important, number one, that, you know, you have jointly agreed, this is for us, right? We love the solution, we buy into it, let's work through it. And then, you know, on the receiving side of it, you know, that you can ensure the delivery is there, right, through everything that's coming. Yeah.
Thank you, Marielle. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Henning, for joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Unfortunately, it's already kind of due. We ran, it's 50 minutes in. There are still some unanswered questions. We will try to send you a written response and kind of make sure that you get these cleared out. For me, it was amazing to have you all here. I hope everyone who listened enjoyed it as well. We learned a lot what startups have to do to make it successful, what corporates have to do to make it successful. We will also share the recording and a quick summary of the takeaways. And Sebastian, you want to say something?
Yeah, I saw a lot of questions dealing with one topic where I would like to give a response as maybe also a value to those guys having this question in mind. I saw a lot of questions to the integration topic, where I also had this picture of Lego plate with a lot of building blocks in mind. To answer that concretely, if you have more or less an important role in supply chain procurement, like Marielle with Roche, or also we can ambassadors for this topic, don't only talk with startups, also talk with those big platform providers in order to make them connect each other. A simple example, the App Store. Yeah, so this is an ecosystem which needs to run together, and therefore you need to talk with both guys in order also to say, hey, you need to make that adaptable to easy integrate. So, and this also need to be pushed from us as ambassadors in this area, just to give an answer to this. Sorry.
No, that's an amazing ending. So push the ecosystems from both sides, especially as a large corporation, you have more power than us because you are actually already using their services and of course work with them for longer. Great ending. I would close it here. I wish you all an amazing rest of the week. Thanks for joining and see you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.